Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
Financial Survival Network is presented to you by Regal Assets. Buy and sell physical gold and silver through your existing retirement plan, 100% tax-free with Regal Assets. If you want to include physical gold or silver in your existing IRA or old 401k, request your free investment kit, which was recently featured in the Forbes and Smart Money Wall Street Journal magazines. Call toll-free 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620, or visit regalassets.com. With me now is Trace Mayer of howtovanish.com, and we're calling this one Escaping the State Surveillance Fetish in 3 Easy Steps. Hey Trace, how you been? It's been a while.
It's been great, Kerry. I've been wandering around, phasing in and out of different places. Was recently at Libertopia down in San Diego, so you get all these people that don't appreciate the state's fetish for surveilling them. It's kind of fun to talk with them about things that they can do to increase their privacy and just allow them to live their life the way that they want to without having to think about people always putting them under a microscope in some petri dish.
Yeah, well, from my lawyer days, and I was kind of in on the birth of online public records access. In fact, I used to give lectures, seminars about it because I was so far ahead. This is 30 years ago, mind you. I used to have like a few hundred lawyers who didn't have a clue. And, they were just in the process of getting property records on and judgments and little doodads that didn't really mean anything, but how far it's advanced, especially for the government in the past 30 years, even amazes me, having been in there in the beginning, because there's 2 companies that pretty much dominate the whole space. It's LexisNexis and it's Westlaw through Thomson Publishing. Maybe Thomson owns both of them now at this point. I don't even know. But you have to think like the computer data aggregators to know how to avoid their surveillance of you, don't you?
Yeah, and especially if you're an attorney. I mean, if you're not properly protecting your client's privileged information, whether it's using encryption with email or things of that nature, then, you're not really doing your job the way that you should be doing it.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I don't practice anymore, but I would like to keep my stuff as private as possible. I wonder about email encryption sometimes, but I guess you have to keep changing providers of the privacy code.
Yeah, and it doesn't apply just to attorneys. I think it would apply to accountants or
Sure.
C-level executives for corporations that might be entrusted with trade secrets. There are a lot of reasons why people would want to take control of their privacy. And so these 3 easy steps that we're going to have, I think it can really be applied by anybody to take control of the facts that they release out there to the public.
Yeah, totally. And so this means that when you type in somebody's name into Google, it's not going to basically tell their life story.
Well, you hope so. I mean, there are only a certain amount of things that you can do, but hopefully you don't let the facts get out there of the entire life story. And if some facts about the life story do get out there, well, hopefully they're nice, friendly ones that you don't mind having been revealed.
I look at myself, obviously I'm a public persona, a lot like you. I type in a Google search, there's 3.8 million hits. So it's to the point where there's so much on me that most of it's just like you could listen to the podcast and you'd know it. It becomes less valuable. But if you're Joe Sixpack or whomever, you just don't want stuff coming out there. You want to keep it under your hat, the information that is important to you. So you avoid stalkers, you avoid government stalkers or other people who are who are trying to figure out what you're doing. So what are the 3 steps?
Okay, so our first step would be to use a virtual private network or something like Tor. This is a free open source software that will allow you to surf the internet in a fairly anonymous manner. Because right now, when you connect to the internet through your ISP and you hit a website, well, they know, the ISP knows that where you're going all over the internet, and the websites that you go to know where you're coming from. And
I just lost you. Hold on one sec. We had a Skype drop.
Maybe somebody's listening in now.
Yeah, I was thinking that very thing.
Because Skype has actually now been bought by Microsoft, and they're compromising some of the security on it. So if people really want a secure way to transmit voice over the internet, I recommend things like Jitsi, JITSI, Juliet Indigo Sierra Tango Indigo.com. But anyways, back to our conversation about using Tor. And Tor is a free open source project where you're able to basically like obfuscate the internet traffic. And just to illustrate, how trade secrets or just letting these facts get into the public sphere could be not necessarily the best thing for a company to have happen. Well, I was one day just looking over the people who had been visiting one of my websites, runtogold.com, and somebody had come through a phrase for buying silver. They had typed that into Google and they came to my website. And I was like, oh, well, that's not out of the ordinary. I get people like that every day usually. But this particular person came from the Goldman Sachs headquarters in New York. And really? I knew what time they came also. And so I wrote up this fun article as Goldman Sachs thinking of buying silver. And it probably got, I think, something like 175,000 views or so just on my site. And it had been syndicated through Yahoo Finance and Seeking Alpha. And I mean, it's showing up all over the place for Goldman Sachs. Yeah. And so that was actually pretty funny. But if Goldman Sachs had been, if this, who knows, maybe it was a senior partner who was still at the office at 11 o'clock at night, or maybe it was just the little lowly new associate. We don't know. But anyways, it was about 11:30 at night, and I put that in there, and I have all these interesting facts about who that possibly could have been. And anyways, it got all types of exposure. And if they had simply used Tor or a VPN, then they could have obfuscated that data, and I wouldn't have necessarily known who they were or where they were coming from. And over at How to Vanish, it's always fun seeing people come in from a .onion because I have no clue who they are. And it's I'm like, oh, it's working. People are taking this seriously. They don't want all their internet traffic and all their search phrases and everything archived and database and stored so that these control freaks that have a surveillance fetish can just comb through their life in a form of retroactive surveillance when they feel like it.
Yeah, and it's so easy to do it. I mean, I used to do this for a living. I was not concerned about a lot of what people were doing in their private life. All I cared about was where they were hiding their money or where they had assets. But in the wrong hands, man, these people can ruin your life. They can do things to you that you never would ever believe possible.
Yeah, and so that also kind of hits on another point is, we have, being public figures, we've got millions of results in Google for us.
Sure.
But how many of those are accurate? I know for a fact that I've seeded some of those results with just flat out disinformation or misinformation in a lot of cases. And so that's another thing that people can do if facts do get out there. You just throw so much mud at the wall that it just raises the cost on anybody trying to actually get any useful, actionable information or intelligence about you.
Well, that's what I've got, because with 3.8 million, most of it is useless.
And it's like, oh man, none of that's of any use whatsoever. And so, they're trying to find needles in haystacks here. And really, it gets to another point. And this point is that the data is collected, and then people become people of interest. It's not the other way around. You're not really a person of interest, and then they go about collecting data on you like it used to be. You know, when people had to get search warrants in order to wiretap your phones. Now they just wiretap everything, and they record everything, and they're running it through automatically using things like Echelon or Carnivore. They're constantly scanning all the conversations for keywords and matching voice recognition and things like that. And so it really is the data that's all collected first, and then you become of interest. And so, you know, if you can just make certain stuff disappear or not even appear in the first place, then, you know, I think that's very useful for people to do.
So what should you do to make stuff disappear?
Our first step's using something like Tor, and you can find that at torproject.org or a VPN. The second thing we do is using a free open source software program called TrueCrypt. And TrueCrypt, found at truecrypt.org, it meets Department of Defense standards for encryption, security, and it hasn't been compromised in any way. And you can basically create a folder that you can put anything in there, and then boom, it's encrypted. And in order to get it out of there, you have to be able to do the math, and you have to have that key in order to unlock it. Otherwise, it takes just a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of money to get in there. And you can put anything in there. You can put pictures in there. You can put pictures of funny cats in there, videos. You can put stuff that you've typed, like letters, etc. And if you encrypt it, and then you can send it via email to your friends or whatever, that's a way that you can securely be moving information and data around, any type of information or data, because you can put any types of files in those TrueCrypt volumes. And so that's a very flexible tool that's free for people to use. And so I like to use that. And sometimes, you know, I might have 100 TrueCrypt folders, TrueCrypt volumes, and only one of those volumes has anything useful in it. But in order to get that one useful piece, you have to open all of those other 100, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're looking in on it, you don't know which of the 100 has any useful information, if any at all. And so, you know, just raise the cost on them. Like, why leave everything plain text? Why not just cipher it and make it so that it's just gobbledygook to anybody who's trying to surveil you? It's just kind of fun, you know, not interesting and that they want to even necessarily look at us, but if they do, just, you know, make it gobbledygook and raise the cost. Make them go through a few extra steps, because we know that these guys, they stay past 5 at the office every day, right?
Oh yeah, because they work for the government. And they're taking care of your business. And I just want to go back to something you said, which is, it used to be that the government, for whatever reason, would suspect you of a crime, and then they would start the surveillance. Now it's the opposite, that they surveil all of us, and they find crimes that way, and then you get prosecuted. So this is like a giant sieve, if you will, looking for real and imaginary crimes to go after us for.
Yeah, it's a complete abhorrence to anybody who believes in criminal due process. And yet the courts have upheld a lot of this. You know, if they collect the data, as long as they don't go looking in the data at any particular person, then it's fine. It's not, you know, they can warrantless wiretap or whatever, or they get exemptions for warrantless wiretapping, like AT&T did under the Bush administration. Exactly. They get pardons and things, and it's just absurd for our notions of fair play and justice and due process and all of these things is really kind of a joke. And so you really have to take the power into your own hands. And that's one of the reasons that I like encryption so much, because it's really just a math problem. And, you know, go ahead, you know, as Hank Reardon said in Atlas Shrugged, which got released on Saturday, I'm sure everybody went and saw it. Like, if you feel that you have the right to use violence against me, bring guns. And that's the great thing about encryption. It's like, bring all the guns you want. Like, you shoot that math problem till it solves itself, right? I mean, no amount of violence is going to solve a math problem. It's not going to open that encryption. And so it really renders that power of the state totally inert. And that's what's so cool about it.
And it's there, it's free, and it's at our fingertips.
Yeah, it's free, open source. I mean, you can erect this force field around you that can't be penetrated by any of their bullets or bombs or any of that stuff. I mean, yeah, they've got a lot of processing power, but in order to use that processing power, there has to be production first, and then they have to acquire that production. And so if you use these encryption tools, it just raises the cost on their surveillance fetish. And with all the sovereign debt defaults and budget deficits and the shrinking economy and all of these things, like, what's going to get cut in the budget, when they don't have the funds?
That's a good question. They're building that huge NSA center in Utah, and you have the guy who is the head of code breaking for the NSA who quit after 9/11, saying they're violating your rights, they're watching everything, they're listening to everything. And that brings me to a great TV show. I don't know if you've caught it, called Person of Interest. And it's about this guy who creates this thing, the machine, which will track down terrorists and pick out the terrorist attacks before they occur. As a byproduct, it also picks up murderers and people who are the subject of murder plots, but it spits out a social security number, and you don't really know whether the number it put out was the victim or the perpetrator. And this guy Harold gets this other guy, John Reese, who is a former CIA spook special forces guy, to go and intercede and stop these murders from happening because the government won't do it. They consider this information to be irrelevant. They only care about terrorists. So a lot of what's in this TV show is exactly what you're describing, and it's only going to get more and more sophisticated. Your privacy will become more and more a memory or a glimmer of what used to be if you don't take steps to save it now.
Yeah, and it's free, it's open source. We can all practice our privacy hygiene to a different level, and depending on the risk and the probability something's going to happen. That's a very fun TV show. I've got a few episodes of it. I don't think that they quite have it to that sophistication yet, but
New York is almost there, my friend. They will have the ability to pinpoint the site of a crime and then almost in real time go back and follow the actors. Like if there's a bank robbery, they see them and then they can just track them back through the webcams, through all the cams all over, and the phone system and the internet, and track them back to their houses. So that's how sophisticated it's getting.
And even if it's sci-fi today, it's not going to be sci-fi tomorrow because of the rate at which all this technology is developing. And that really brings us to the third thing that we can all begin to do, and that's we've talked about it before on the show, is Bitcoin, which is this new currency that's based on encryption. And when you think about it, we give them so much information when it comes to the economy, when it comes to stocks. We think we're trading against these people in the market, right? But they have such superior information to us. Of course, the retail investor gets skinned alive because they're able to see all the credit card transactions that are going through. They know which doing well and which ones aren't. They know the earnings of companies in a lot of cases, or at least they have the data than the companies even do, or release it publicly.
Oh, you're so right. Yeah.
Bitcoin, we're able to take deposits out of the bank, starving them of capital, not allowing them to make loans. We're able to cut them off from receiving transaction fees. They don't get to charge account fees. We're able to have a currency that's limited in amount, as opposed to all this quantitative easing. And as a result, as demand for Bitcoins rises, then the price is going to rise. And as more people use it, that price can just go as high as it needs to go to accommodate and provide enough money supply for everybody. And in the process, it sucks in more capital because people love a rising price. Last time we talked about it on the show, I think it was $5, and now it's $12.
Wow.
6 months. And so the question really becomes like, why? And I hit on this at Libertopia. I was like, Libertopia accepted Bitcoin for people to pay there. And I was like, how many people paid with Bitcoin? Well, there was one out of a couple hundred.
And
I was like,
probably.
You can't confirm or deny whether I paid for Libertopia.
Yeah, I'm just kidding, but yeah.
With PayPal, but that raises the interesting issue. All the people who paid for it with PayPal or credit cards or whatever, that's now in the database. Like, they're the easy to catch buffalo, right? Like,
yep.
The guy that or the gal that paid with Bitcoin, flying overhead with wings. Like, the alligator's going to have a hard time catching that one.
Yeah.
And so, when we keep our money in the banks, especially the big banks, and when we use their credit cards and their debit cards, when we use their products, when we have an alternative now, we are in effect funding our own chains that they use. We give them the resources that they then employ to surveil us and to track us. And if we were to just shift more of our monetary demand and more of our payment and transactional demand into Bitcoin, then it would be like cutting off the carotid artery to their brain. If the Fed is the heart and Visa and PayPal are the blood, then that carotid artery, you cut that off for 3 seconds, it's near the neck, cut it off for 3 seconds, passes out. And absolutely weakest point for Leviathan. And that's one of the reasons I think Ludwig von Mises, he said, it's impossible to understand the concept of sound money without understanding that it's a bulwark against despotic inroads on the part of government. It belongs in the same class as constitutions and bills of right. And right there in the U.S. Constitution, gold and silver are there. And one of the reasons, I think, is because they're private. And the power of the purse is private. And this whole notion and idea of politicizing currency and making it tracked to an identity, well, that didn't start until 1970 with the Bank Secrecy Act. If you go to FinCEN.gov and look at the history of money laundering laws, like before that, the medium of exchange was not politicized, and the medium of exchange was not tied to identity in the ways that we're tying it now. And that allows the merchants in the economy to be engaged in these free, voluntary transactions. And so by using their system and by keeping our money there, we're funding Leviathan. Like, let's take away its food source. Why not? And
Sure.
And make it a lot more expensive for Leviathan's eyes to be engaged in this surveillance fetish. I mean, if you like being the one under the microscope in the petri dish, keep using the banks and using the financial system. But, if you really want to strike back at Leviathan where it's absolutely weakest, where it's most exposed, I think Bitcoin is that kryptonite dagger to the Leviathan, or at least something like it will be. This ability to decentralize the payment mechanism in the economy and remove it from being tied to identity. I think that's going to be essential for, one, protecting our privacy, two, removing the asymmetrical information that they have over the economy that they can use to trade against us in the markets, further taking more of our resources, and three, just totally blacking out what's going on in the economy to them in general.
Yeah, I like the concept of it, and I think it definitely has value. So Trace, to find out more about you, obviously howtovanish.com. We've got the link in there, runtogold.com. Any other sites out there that people should be looking at?
So just to recap on the three main ones that we hit on in the interview, there's torproject.org, so TOR project.org, truecrypt.org, and then freebitcoinguide.com, and that'll give people a good introduction to Bitcoin and how to begin using it. If you're in San Francisco, a cupcake shop just started accepting it, so you can go buy these extremely dangerous cupcakes in an anonymous way.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to fear from cupcakes, but mainly around my waist. But on that note, hey, if you want to hear this interview again, replay it, or other ones that I've done with Trace over the past year, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And if you got any questions for Trace, just send me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. We love to get your emails. Trace will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Trace, as always, a pleasure.
Thanks, Gary. It was wonderful.
Be well.